Morning, everyone. Morning. Welcome to another day 3 of the feast. My name, my name is Joe Perry. I'm not the Joe Perry from Aerosmith, as was pointed out earlier in the feast. I'm an amateur archaeologist, not a professional, but I did stay at a great feast site last night. So if you look at, let me turn this back. Our first slide for today, we're going to be talking about the archaeology and history of ancient Lachish. Now, Lachish that's the pronunciation of it, except that the CH has a guttural sound like Lachish. But my wife says that I sound like a Klingon from Star Trek when I do it, so I'm not going to do the guttural. So just realize it should be there, all right? Now, the full name of it is actually Tel Lachish. And the reason for that is you see that there's a picture of it as it looked in 1934 before they started working on it very much. The reason it's called Tel Lachish is because you see it's on a hill, okay? The word tel in Hebrew means hill. Okay, now it always wasn't that tall, okay? When you realize that there were 18 in all civilizations on that hill, 18 times it was built and rebuilt. So it built up that hill as one civilization built on the remains of the previous civilization. Okay, so some of these changes were very minor, some were more intensive, as we'll see. I don't know, how many of y'all were here last year for this? Most of you? Some of you? Some were not? Okay, so we're going to do a brief review about archaeology and biblical archaeology. Okay, there's a definition of archaeology. It's the scientific study of material remains such as fossils, artifacts, and monuments of past human life and activities. It helps us to, put the history together of the past from the lost civilizations, which there are all over the world. Archaeological digs go on everywhere, including the United States, to dig up ancient civilizations that were here back in the past. Now, this is a particular special study, though, that we're looking at today. It's called biblical archaeology. Now, biblical archaeology is a branch of biblical studies and interdisciplinary pursuit that seeks to utilize the pertinent results of archaeological research to elucidate the historical and cultural setting of the Bible. That's a really big way of saying that we use archaeology to try to prove things in the Bible. And I got a little, actually, quote right here from Psalms 85, verse 11, "Truth springs from the earth." In this case, that's exactly what happens. We can't prove everything from the Bible, from the archaeology. You can't prove that Jesus did his miracle of the loaves and fishes, for instance. But we have found things. The plaque in Tel Dan, it was actually a tablet that had a letter boasting of the victory of Syria over the house of David. And that's our proof. There are those who claim that David and Solomon, that was just a myth, didn't actually exist. So when that tablet was discovered, that was the proof that the house of David really was there. It was a very important discovery. We also, if you remember, Hezekiah's tunnel that brought the water from the Gihon spring into Jerusalem, which was very important, particularly when the city was under siege. They found that tunnel, and in that tunnel they found an inscription dedicated to Hezekiah from the workers who built the tunnel together. Also, Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal, where he made sacrifice after they, went into the land. They found that, and I could go on. Tel Dan, the city there where they put one of the pagan temples after the kingdom broke apart. They found where the altar was there, where they did sacrifices to pagan gods. So, biblical archaeology. Now, one of the things that's kind of sad about biblical archaeology is that Archaeologists come from all over the world. Even Japan, I understand, has had teams there. The United States is very interested. It's all under the aegis of the Israel Antiquities Authority. They are the ones who oversee it all. But they come from all over the world. But not every archaeologist is a believer in what they're finding. A lot of them are secular. In fact, some years ago, there was a movement to change the name from biblical archaeology to Syro-Palestinian archaeology, reflecting the area where they're doing it. Fortunately, that got shot down. I mean, we want to stress that we do biblical archaeology to prove out the Bible. That's the important thing, to show that and find the sites where biblical events took place, like Lachish. All right, let's start looking at this. As I said, there's Lachish in about 1934, before archaeological digs started there. It's interesting. Excuse me. Well, I'm really gotten raspy today. Lachish was lost for almost 2,000 years. The last occupation there was back during Hellenistic times, before Yeshua was born. Then it was abandoned. And over the centuries, the location of it was lost. Edward Robertson from the United States, an explorer, went through Israel. As that time was under the Turkish occupation, they owned it, ruled it. But he went through the area in 1838 to about 1845 looking for biblical sites. He identified a number of them and were very great, did pioneer that, doing that. A lot of places we wouldn't know about if it hadn't been for him. But he couldn't find Lachish. He didn't locate Lachish. It took many years later before finally in 1929 the man they call the father of modern biblical archaeology, William Albright, in 1929 decided that this tale here was Tel Lachish. Still, people didn't necessarily believe him, and it wasn't until they uncovered a Roman road that ran along the area, a large road ran down to the coast and up to Syria. They started uncovering that road, that they were able to look at a 4th century historian named Eusebius, who said that the road ran 7 miles from a place called Euthyopolis to Tel Lachish. Well, they found where Euthyopolis was, and they found the road, and it did run 7 miles, so finally pinpointed this as being Tel Lachish. And it's mentioned 22 times in the Bible. 22 times. Here's a few of them. And Adonai delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel, and he took it on the 2nd day. That's basically when Joshua delivered, from Joshua's time, how the Israelites conquered Lachish. It was a Canaanite city first. And in the 2nd Chronicles there, it says, after this did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and his servants, sent his servants to Jerusalem. Now he was before Lachish, and all his power with him. Then in Jeremiah 34:7, this is not much later, when the Babylonians were fighting, when the king of Babylon's army was fighting against Jerusalem and against all the cities of Judah that were left, against Lachish and against Azekah, for those below remained of the cities of Judah as fortified cities. I claim that this, and others do claim that this is actually in the time of the divided kingdom after the northern tribes split off, that this became the 2nd most important city in Judah. Okay, the reason for this was this is located west of Jerusalem. And if you're going to come to Jerusalem from the west, it was the easiest way to get there for an invading force, just because the way the hills and the valleys runs from west to east, going up towards Jerusalem. It's the easiest route to get through, to get there. This city stood in the way. You had to get past. It was a fortress city, a large military force there. we'll see how it looked with walls and whatnot. It was built up as to be a military city to protect Jerusalem and the rest of Judea. And what happened was that so the armies would go up against it and take this city, and then they would go on to Jerusalem. That's why it said that. Remember when Sennacherib sent envoys to Hezekiah, and to saying that, hey, you guys, your God's no good. We've conquered all these other nations and defeated their gods, and you're next. Well, he was at Lachish. His army was at Lachish, besieging this city. And then it was only after they took Lachish they were able to go up against Jerusalem. And of course, we know what happened. They were 185,000 and wind up dying, and Jerusalem was spared at that time. Somehow I missed a slide somewhere. Let's see. That's what I'm looking for. Nope. Oh, I'm going forward. Sorry. There we go. 18 levels of occupation. Some of them were very minor. The city, so that's why it's just way more than most places. It's an archaeological treasure here, and that's why there were. Eventually, we'll see someone dug here for like 22 years trying to uncover as much of this as they could. But there's some of the levels there. Now, the city was actually destroyed 5 or 6 times, depending on what archaeologist you're talking to. But that's like 5 times they had to rebuild it from scratch. The other times they were from just adding on things to it. 5 times. The first time was way back when in Canaanite times, around the 15th century. The second time would be when Joshua took it. Okay, now we'll look at that just a little bit. The archaeologists who dug it at that time actually thought it wasn't the Israelites who took the city, but rather it was the Egyptians. But of course, we know our Bible, so it had to be Joshua, right? And the Bible does state that he, took it and put it under the ban, as it was called, and just totally destroyed the place. And then, of course, there were, the other times occurred during the Assyrian and Babylonian invasions. All right. But anyway, 18 times. In fact, there were so many levels that my wife couldn't get them all on one slide. So, you'll see down there. By the way, I have a book here that I'm going to put in the back later that shows way more than what I'm able to present here today. And if anyone's interested, they're welcome to take it and look at it later. All right, so between the world wars, Israel is is finally taken over by the British. They drive the Turks out during World War I, so they are able to take over Palestine, what became Israel. So they brought in their own archaeologists who were, eager to get to some of these sites and start seeing what they can find. So the first archaeologist to dig at there was a man. I'm going too sorry. I don't know how to use this thing. Let's go back a couple. James Starkey. He's the first archaeologist at Lachish. He started digging there in 1934. This is like the dawn of the age of his biblical archaeology. And he dug there for 4 years, uncovered some of it. But the interesting thing about it is that the dig he had to, in 1938, the dig ended because, terrorism. We all know who the Rockefeller family is from New York. Nelson Rockefeller was our vice president about 50 years ago. Well, it turns out that they had uncovered a number of artifacts. So the British wanted to start a museum in Jerusalem, an archaeological museum. So they were going to have the grand opening in January of 1938. So they wanted Starkey to be there. Of course, he's out at his dig, to the west. So they sent a taxi out for him to take him to the museum. So they're driving their taxi back toward Jerusalem, and lo and behold, Arab terrorists come against them, and they kill Starkey and his Arab driver, and unfortunately he died. So, for one of the early acts of terrorism, there were about, at that time I checked, at that time about 300,000 Jewish people had immigrated to Israel at that time, way outnumbered by the Arabian population. The British had a heck of a time trying to keep order, even back then. Israel, Jewish people were not welcome in that land. Anyway, so they had a big funeral for Starkey, and there's this funeral procession in Jerusalem. I got a picture of that. So unfortunately, there's a lot of good places to dig in Israel, and no one took up his work until about 1966, when a gentleman named Yohanan Aharoni, an Italian man, came of Jewish descent, dug there for a couple of years from about 1966 to 1968, and then he went on to other things, and it was left to this man, David Usishkin, who finally took it over in 1972 and dug there for 22 years, uncovering different parts of the tell. So 22 years worth of digs, and he wrote, fortunately, after it was over, he wrote this book, Biblical Lachish, and that's where all your pictures that I got are coming from. So, and since 1994, he was the last person to dig on there, and he got a lot uncovered. You know, of course, and if you know anything about archaeology, when you uncover something, if you want to get to the Canaanite and see what the Canaanites, you've got to go through everything else that gets down there. You know, the oldest civilizations are on the bottom, not the top. So you run the risk of destroying things that you might, wish you didn't have to do that. So you dig down to one civilization on one part of the tell, that dig down another civilization on another part of the tell. You never just, it's all hodgepodge here and there. So you never get to dig up the whole tell and see what's there. And once you remove something, it's gone. It's gone. You can't put it back either. So you have to be very, very careful. So that's why it takes 22 years to uncover some of the things that we're gonna look at. Okay, here's a diagram of what the whole place looked like back in the day of the divided kingdom, when the city was at its height. Okay. If you see on the right there, toward the bottom, you see the ramp leading up to the city to go up to the hill, see? Because it's flat all around there, of course. And right there where the ramp turns to it would be the right, going up the hill to the top of the hill. That is the city gate. Now, I'm sorry, I realized when I got here I didn't take a good picture of the city gate itself, but I don't know about you, but when I was first starting to read the Bible and you come across the word city gate, well, the first thing you think of, just a little gate you open up and, let people through. Then maybe when you get a little older, you think about, well, okay, maybe there's, it's a part of the wall, and maybe there's a nice little arch there you go through and everything. But it's actually much more complicated than that. Here, for instance, there's actually an outer gate and an inner gate. And in between those two gates, there's rooms that are actually built into the city walls where they conducted administrative business and merchandise, and merchants would work there and stuff. If you remember the story of Boaz and Ruth, and he went to the city gate of Bethsaida, which probably wasn't near as complicated as this one, but still was more than just just a simple little place. And that's where he conducted business to get to the hand of Ruth. So city gates they're complicated things, and this one was one of the more elaborate ones. Now over to let's look at some places. Okay, this up at the top of the picture, running from left to right, is the actual city wall. And this is the time after the city was taken over by the Canaanites, and successors to Solomon decided they were going to build this into a fortified city, great fortified city, so they can hold back any invaders here. So they built this high city wall, and they've uncovered a good bit of it. You can see there's kind of like a walkway. You can get up there and walk from one end of it to the other. Now all those stones piled up there, you see a pile on the left and like there's an indentation, then a pile on the right is actually this Syrian ramp that they built so they could get up on the wall and take the city. And of course, they were eventually successful in doing that in 721 BC. So the city was under siege, so they've uncovered some of that some of that ramp and a good bit of the wall there. Okay, but the city started out as I'm sorry, I'm not going in quite exactly chronological order here, so please bear with me. This is back in Canaanite. This is a Canaanite pagan temple that they uncovered. You see the large space there is the hall, I guess, where the people would worship. And you see some steps leading up there. There's 3 rooms beyond that, 3 little rooms, and then like a sanctuary type place beyond that. So this is quite a large operation, this back during Canaanite times. Of course, this was all, the walls were all beat up and torn down, because when Joshua took the city, he put it under the ban and pretty well destroyed it. But there you go with the pagan temple. So that was and the city was, Canaanites controlled this city for hundreds of years, okay, before the Israelites came back into the land. And so it was built up. They had it was a pretty good sized city then too, just when they were there. And then the city kind of like, there were settlements on the city, but they didn't really make it into a big place. It was a nice place. It's a nice hill, you kind of want to go somewhere where you feel you're going to be safe. So people would settle up there, but they didn't really make it into an important city until after Solomon was king and the kingdom divided. So they had, they were worried about their northern neighbors, Israel. They had fights between the tribes and also other invaders. So they made it into the fortified city we saw that diagram of. Okay. Back to the Canaanite times, it's hard to make out on the picture. This is a picture of a pagan goddess standing on a horse. I don't know if she was supposed to be the equestrian champion of her day, or what, but that's how they depicted it. Her head it's hard to see it, and then I couldn't. In the picture in the book was pretty, but you don't find a lot of artifacts and things left in here. Everything got so destroyed that's great when you can find something even like this. She's got her head turned toward the right and put a fulling face on to the horse, and it's thought that's the goddess Astarte, which was a very prominent goddess during ancient times throughout the Middle East. Okay. Let's see. Here we have. Let's see. This not should be the next picture. Oh, these are like four stopper jars here that they found. One of them actually had the stopper on it, so they were just typical jars that were used during the Judean time. And actually, can't really tell from here, but all those jars are marked LMLK. You find this type of jar everywhere around Israel, and the letters LMLK mean belonging to the king. So I don't know. Well, I guess whatever they stored inside these jars, I guess it was for his use, or perhaps for the military and the administrative folks and whoever ran those places. But they're very popular jar. Find that one of the most common ones. Okay, here is a typical house that they uncovered during the Assyrian period. You can see, if you can make out, up on the top is the city wall running from left to right. This house actually pretty much butts up against the city wall. So It's a four-room house. It looks like the room on the top right there looks like it's a shaft going downwards. I guess they decided to go deeper, dig deeper. But the typical four-room house you find throughout the archaeological sites in Judea and Israel. And sometimes there would be a little courtyard on where you could house your animals. That would be a little like separate narrow passageway going from one end to the other of the house. Didn't do that here. On the left is the first couple rooms of another house. So, folks, typical Jewish dwelling. Probably, if you were lucky, it might go out to the end of the hallway. You start going down the hallway there from here. It wouldn't be terribly big, but it was room enough for a family to stay. So, but it's not huge. There were, if you had money, if you were part of the city elite, you probably would get bigger dwellings to live in. Things don't change. The more money you got, more prestige, power, the more you have. Okay, here is the city wall. That thing, Sishkin didn't put a height for it in his book, so I don't know exactly how tall it was, but you see the figure there of a man standing there down at the bottom. So you can see how tall that is over above him. I can tell you that the city wall was about 100 feet in each of the four sides, so pretty good size there. Actually, and that's not, when I say that's city wall, I'm sorry. It's actually what they call the palace fort that was built during the divided kingdom to help as part of the fortifications. I guess if you got driven back from the city wall, you can go inside the fort, which also served as the palace, apparently, and you could just go in there and hold out there for a while. Of course, in the end, it didn't do them any good. The city was taken, but that's quite a structure. So they were pretty intense in what they were trying to do to protect Lachish. That's a big operation, putting that up. Shows you too that the divided kingdom after Solomon, they had resources. You had this, because they certainly cost some money even in those times to build that and put it all together and make the place up. This wasn't the only fortified location. This was the biggest one, but they found other smaller ones too. Those tells that I've talked about, you find them all over Israel. All over. Okay, I put this up again, the palace fort, and once again, I did two things. I didn't get a picture of the palace fort or a better picture of the wall. But the palace fort is, see the open area on the right of the picture? The palace fort is that area that's jutting out there. So I speculated about that wide open area. It would have been a great place to put a baseball field in. And by the way, if I'm a little grumpy today, it's because the Yankees got eliminated from the playoffs last night. No World Series for them this year. Okay. Okay, this is the most interesting picture. See that dark area in the middle with the little rod going across there? That depicts the city being destroyed by the Assyrians. That's the ash from the burning of the city in one area, and just one area they uncovered there. So that proves that, there you go, there's your proof. The city was destroyed by the Assyrians, as the Bible says it would. And up against the lighted area to the back of that black area of ash, those are bricks piled up. I guess when they went to rebuild, they just took all the bricks that had tumbled down and made a pile of them. But they date back to the Assyrian times. Now, after the Assyrian destruction, the city came back to life again, but very slowly. But it was a thriving community again by the time the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar's army, showed up in 586 and took Jerusalem. They had to go through Lachish first again and destroyed it again. So, but we don't have, Usishkin, at least in his book, didn't put a whole lot of artifacts or anything that they found during the Babylonian period. So don't really have anything much to show you here. It'd be fun to go back in eternity, and I'll bet you'll be able to go see all this as it really was. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, once again, there's the ramp again. That I don't really need that in there. Okay, this is from Sennacherib's palace, the ruler of Assyria at the time that took Lachish. And it's hard to say, but in the middle of the picture, there's what they believe to be 3 Jewish leaders from Lachish, and they impaled them. There's like a spear running through their bodies. And that's how they just killed. Usually they took a place. They just, leadership. They just killed it. We have descriptions in the Bible of what happened to the king when Babylon took the place and took Jerusalem in 586. What they did to him. But most of the people just got to go into exile. And there are on this relief this is, I guess, celebrate your victories. You just show you how you defeated your enemies and what happened to them. Kings were big on doing that in those days. So they make these big elaborate, won't call them paintings, but engravings. And here, this one shows the Israeli Jewish exiles going into exiles, leaving Lachish and being sent off. Actually, I'm sorry, I said Assyrian. This is bad. So Lachish they did take Lachish. Fortunately, they didn't get Jerusalem, but they pretty well destroyed every other city in that area. So it was a final victory for Israel, but the war as a whole took a lot of destruction before they finally won it. So. Okay, and I put the 4 jars in there again. Okay, these are scarabs. Okay, there's 4 wings. You can see some better than others. There's like a 4-winged scarab symbol on those. And there's some Hebrew lettering on there too, and it says the Hebrew lettering is belonging to the king. And then the word Hebron. Hebron, of course, was another city. So I don't know if they just jars, and here's where those jars are supposed to go. They belong to that city. Of course, these Hebron ones showed up in Lachish, so I guess would probably indicate there was certainly trade going on between different places. Let's see. Okay, so they found a number of these in the city. Yeah, sure. No, I don't think anyone knows exactly what that means. But they do think they're Egyptian. Okay, they actually more have Egyptian symbology. And well, there's another question: why is there? I'm glad you brought that up because I mentioned why is there Egyptian symbology on things you find in Lachish? Unless there was some trade going on between, and there probably was, but hopefully they didn't. It wasn't because they starting to adopt Egyptian things. But here's some more. Now these are what are called seals, and the one on the right is called a bulla. Well, we all know what seals are. They use to stamp your letters and documents, and then scrolls in this case. But a bulla is a soft token used in commercial and legal documentation as a form of authentication for tamper-proofing whatever is attached to it. You see, the first one is a sphinx, again, an Egyptian symbols, Sphinx and an Egyptian ankh symbol on the scarab on the left. The second one's a scarab. It says that the lettering says it belongs to Ahimelech. And the bulla on the right shows a four-winged beetle and an ankh belonging to Gedaliah, who is over the house. Now, the speculation is that there was a figure in the Bible named Gedaliah, who was actually put over Israel after the Babylonian destruction. And so we're wondering as if that's referring to him. That's never one of those things you don't know for sure, but it's a good possibility. Yes.
So I know you must get. There must be hundreds of questions, but were they made of anything like a precious metal? Were they made of gold?
No, they were kind of wax. Pretty much. Yeah, just wax. Just like you get today, you could stamp something, and it's not as popular thing, but seal just to seal your letters. So it's like a wax seal. So, you get something that would have the impression, then you just take your wax and symbol.
It was you melted wax, and then you had something with the symbol, and you pressed it into the wax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the thing that they pressed in is what we're looking at here.
I'll try. I'll look in the book and get the answer for you. I'm sorry, I didn't check that out. Most likely, you're probably right. Now, this to me is one of the more interesting things because you don't see this very much at all. Remember, after the Babylonian exile, the Jews were able to come back to their land. Okay, but it was under Persian rule. So this is we're actually looking at a Persian temple. We know that from the design, and because you can find these in other Persian territories. It's called the Solar Shrine, and it's called that because the facade of it faces to the east, into the sun, to the sun. But we don't know too much about it. But is it a shrine to a cult or a god? And the thing that intrigues me: who was there worshiping there? Did some of the Israelites bring Persian ways back with them when they left Babylon, or did Persian folks worship there? Of course, they built. So you don't find many of these. This is the only one I know of that they've uncovered, this particular temple in the Holy Land. Okay, this jar was found in a place they call the wine storeroom. It's kind of beat up, but it says on it reads, in the 4th year. So the speculation is, since it was found right before the Babylonian destruction, on the layer that had the destruction, that it would be the 4th year meant 4th year of Zedekiah, who was king at that time, which would be about 594, 593 BC. And Zedekiah was the king who rebelled against Babylon in 586 BC and brought about the destruction of Jerusalem. So it's speculation, but it's a good chance that if you're saying something, the 4th year of what? 4th year of what? It might well be the 4th year of his reign. So yeah, so I wish I could show you like 1,000 more, names and inscriptions and stuff. They just don't have that. One sad thing about archaeology, it's not like when you get to the city limits, there's no town saying "Welcome to Lachish," or "Welcome to Jerusalem." So you have a hard time identifying places and people. But the Bible, one thing I can say about the Bible is that in archaeology has turned up the names of dozens of biblical figures. From kings and administrators, and there are a lot of names in the Bible that we have thanks to the historicity of it. People wrote down the names of a lot of the rulers and administrators, and a lot of those have turned up on inscriptions and letters. One thing, it is sad, unlike some parts of the Middle East where they've actually found full libraries of tablets and scrolls, and or like the Dead Sea Scrolls. They've never uncovered a library in Israel. So it's too bad that we don't have that kind of documentation. Yes, David?
I would say Chronicles and Kings is your library.
Yeah, that's about all we got, isn't it? And it's sad you go and look at those books and they say, and so-and-so is written in the Chronicles of so-and-so, and we don't have that book anymore. But there is those are the historical books of the Bible. Quite right. Okay, well, after 94, there were no more digs on the land, but a lot of archaeological sites in Israel. Well, you dig it and you leave it, and over the years, you can see what's there, what you've dug up, and what you found. But over the years, sites deteriorate, and erosion takes place. You get water on it, and from rain and stuff, and it just doesn't look quite the same anymore. But here, though, they decided this was such an important site, they decided to save it. And you can see, and actually reconstruct some of the things that they had to discard when they were trying to get to lower levels. And so here we see a reconstruction of the city gate. I found a few pictures of the place online. I couldn't find a picture that would show you the whole park, but they've turned it into a national park today. And there's the reconstructed city. It's leading up to the city gate there, going up the hill. And in there's a whole park. It's called Lachish National Park. And you can go there today and visit the site, apparently. Has anyone ever been to Israel, actually seen any of this stuff? I wish you had. Good for you. Did you go to the archaeological sites?
We went with Ron Wyatt.
Oh, okay. Wow, yeah, I'll bet. Okay, yeah. Ron Wyatt was one of the great archaeologists of his time. Unfortunately, he's passed on. But yeah, so you can go there today and see that. It's a wonderful, wonderful place, I'm told. And like I say, I've got the book here, which has a lot more pictures. And last year, I was told I had used too many slides, and we ran way past ish time. So, but I'll put the book in the back there. You're welcome to pick it up if you'll just return it when you're done with it, so the next person can take a look at it. And I'll just leave it there through the rest of the feast. Okay, one more thing I wanted to talk about. I don't have slides for this, but archaeology is an interesting science. It's because some things you find easily, and some things there are problems. There's puzzles, and kind of working out the puzzles is kind of one of the more interesting things about archaeology. So there's a city back in Yeshua's time called Bethsaida, and it was on the Sea of Galilee. And so it was the home, according to the Bible, it was the birthplace of Peter and Andrew and Philip, three of the apostles. So, that'd be a great sight to find. Only they look around the shores of the Sea of Galilee where they think it should be, and there's nothing there. And so, some years ago, they found a location. One of the ancient kingdoms was called Gezer, that remained in the land that Joshua did not destroy the Gezerites, and so they had their own little area there, and the city was called Gezer. Well, they found what they found, what they thought was Gezer, and then they said, "Hey, this must be the Bethsaida." It turned into Bethsaida during Yeshua's time. Okay, well, it's a mile and a half from the Sea of Galilee. So what happened? So speculation was that, well, over the centuries, the shoreline of the lake changed, and the lake wasn't as large as it was, and so the city just got stranded way back there, and a mile and a half away from shore. Of course, other people saying, "Wait a second, Bethsaida, we know where Bethsaida was, and it was on the other side of the lake." So how did it get it? Why is it that this is on the eastern side of the lake when Bethsaida is more on the western side? Well, there the matter stood for some years, and people started reading, well, this must be it. Turns out it wasn't. It seems that back around 2016, about 10 years ago, they had a little area that was off the lake. It wasn't on the lakefront either. It was a little bit inland, but it was closer. And they knew there was a couple, you can see through that there was something was there, a little bit of something was exposed up, had been exposed. But they didn't know what it was, and didn't seem worthwhile fooling with when there's so many other bigger places that they could. Then all of a sudden, one day, a man dropped a cigarette on the grass, burned up all the grass. They had to get the whole fire department. Apparently, it was a pretty big conflagration. And when they put the fire out and all the grass had burned away, lo and behold, there's this whole town looks like ruins up underneath there. And well, one problem with Bethsaida, the place they had there, they thought it was a big town. It didn't look like a fishing town, poor. Just it looked like it was more opulent than that. So that was one argument people were making against it. But so this looked more like a fishing village and whatnot. And then somebody finally, a light bulb went on somebody's head. The Arabs were in control of the Holy Land for, well over 1,000 years. And they put their own names on places, okay? Lots of times there was some close to what the Israelite, everybody likes to change his names a bit. Like we've changed a number of Hebrew words in our Bible and made them into English. Well, they had changed this word too. They call it El Araj, this little village that they discovered under that burned grass. And suddenly realized the word El Araj in Arabic means limping man. Okay, so what's the significance of this? Well, when Yeshua cured a man with the crippled man, it was at the pool of Bethesda. So did the Arabs misname and think of Bethesda was Bethsaida. It was like just got themselves mixed up. So that was a clue that what they were calling El Araj. Another clue that it was actually the fishing village of Bethsaida. So just kind of like clinched the argument. So that's how, strange ways you find out what different places are and, put two and two together in archaeology. Okay. That's all I have for you today. Before I open up the question, I want to thank all the people. This would not have been possible without, it takes a village for Joe to put on a presentation. My wife is responsible for the slideshow. I don't know how to put slides together on a computer. She does that for me. Michael set up the computer that would work. Bernard was on sound. Ashley over there on camera. So just thank you all, like I say, Lord, for all your help. All right. Any questions?
Thank you, Joe. I do have a question or two. In reference to Lachish, you said there was 18 possible civilizations that they've dug through.
Right.
Do we know how many feet that is from the last civilization to the very first one?
That figure was not in the book, but it's pretty extensive. It was turned out to be a pretty tall place.
100 feet?
Yeah, I would say probably, sure, yeah. And like a lot of the civilizations, you're almost like nitpicking with some of the levels. Like 5 of the levels are between the Assyrian destruction and the Babylonian destruction. Well, the city wasn't destroyed during that time. I guess they just decided to put a new building on top of something, to make it more elaborate structures or something. So it wasn't a reason to have to rebuild the whole city except that you just wanted to.
Okay, one other question.
Yeah.
Lachish, how many miles was it west of Jerusalem?
I tried to look that up too. It can't be more than a few dozen because just nothing's that. The place isn't that big.
Did the Assyrians mainly took the northern kingdom of Israel
first, right.
and took them into captivity.
Right.
Did they also go into the southern kingdom and destroy Lachish?
Yes, they went into the southern kingdom and destroyed Lachish, and that engraving there supposedly, I guess, shows that the actual residents from Lachish being sent into exile. So that was a big victory for them, apparently, because that was no easy place to take. And after they didn't take Jerusalem, well, what are you going to celebrate? You can't put the king into a bad light that he was losing.
Thank you.
So, if I heard this right at the beginning, so you had these 18 levels, all right, of Lachish, but then if I heard you right, you said it was like, it had been lost for like 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Is that right? So, why, do they know why? It's weird that like they would spend all this time to rebuild the same site. It seems like a key site because it's right into going into Jerusalem. Why is it that it would be lost for 2,000 years?
Thank you for the question, because I forgot the last thing I was supposed to say in this presentation was that that after the Babylonian occupation destroyed the place, it was never returned to its former glory. People did live there. Through the Persian period, we saw the solar shrine. It was not just a shadow of its former self. And during the Greek period, after the Greeks conquered, Alexander the Great conquered that area, there was some settlement on the hill too. But by 150 BC, it was totally abandoned. So no one ever lived there for like 2,000 years. Yeah, we don't. That's something just nobody knows. I guess it wasn't a viable location anymore or something. Yes, Dave.
Turn down, there you go.
Just a particular observation in biblical archaeology overall. We know that critics like to downplay the history of the Bible and stuff. But has anybody ever asked the question that maybe why they don't find much is because, well, they obeyed the second commandment, thereby they wouldn't have idolatry or pictures or anything?
Yeah.
All they have is
that's right.
ostraca, which is the pot shards which they would record things on, or the bulla, as you say, the seal impressions. But also they may attribute to some of the Canaanite artifacts, the pagan stuff that we see, might actually also be Israelites that have gone into idolatry. I often wondered if there'd be an archaeologist who kind of compare with the history of the Bible and stuff on this thing.
Well, like they say you can't, they'll say, the patriarchs weren't real, we can't find any evidence of them. Well, okay, the lack of evidence is not a reason to say something happened. Just because you can't find something doesn't mean it didn't happen. Also, the fact, I think, with the patriarchs, well, they didn't stay in one place. They moved around. Look, it even records some of their movements through the land. So they didn't leave anything behind.
Well, there's also a good example with Shiloh, the recent redigs, where they went back and gone into some of the stuff they dug and put to the side and found as if anybody knows about the lead curse tablet they found with the earliest reference to Yahweh. And of course, that's still in dispute. But also with their digs, they approximately think they know exactly where the Ark of the Covenant had stood in Shiloh at that point. And they also found pits, and this is certainly a clear indication of Israelite occupation, sacrificed animal remains which are just clean. So they're just clean animals. So there are indications that it could do if they would just look into the Bible and see. But of course, that's critics. Well, you're just reading into it.
Yeah, you come into it with an attitude that you don't believe in the first place, so you're just going to look for things that will support your ideas.
Okay.
So I have a question about the Bethsaida sites. Do you think that over the last 2,000 years that the lake could have just shrunk?
Yes.
So the area is getting drier in general, right? Do you think?
Yeah.
They didn't think it could be Bethsaida because it was 1.5 miles away, but do you think the lake could have been bigger?
Yes, probably that was exactly it. Just because, over 2,000 years, that's a long time. Things change. Let's say even the site they have now is not exactly on the lake. It's closer to the Sea of Galilee. It's closer to it, but.
So I just had one more comment. I was fascinated by the ramp that you had, the Syrian ramp going up into it. I mean, that looked to me like that took a long time to build that ramp, and I'm sure they didn't want them to build that ramp. That must have been
I was wondering.
quite a struggle over making that ramp, how long it took to make and et cetera. I mean, that ramp looks huge. I mean, maybe 30, 40 feet tall.
They also had battering rams that they tried to use, large battering rams that they used. Since they were wooden, there weren't any remains of them. They believe they had those too, that they were, with a tower and with a ram, with a battering ram on it, and they would just swing it against cities. So maybe, you kind of wonder how they were able to, stand. The Israelites didn't just let them build that ramp.
Exactly.
They must have been fighting them pretty hard. Probably why it took a while to take the city, but eventually they did it.
I just want to say I'm fascinated by their technology. Because centuries later, that stuff's still standing and things we have nowadays fall apart. So I'm just fascinated with that part of it.
They didn't build no junk back in those days.
They did
made
not.
it. All right. Well, thank you very much. I understand that we have another presentation of our archaeology coming at the end of the feast, and I'm looking forward to it. Mr. Mark Jacobs is going to talk, I think, on Monday. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, one more. Sure.
I've always been interested in what holy tours they have. I know a guy named Dennis Prager, who's Jewish. He led tours through the Holy Lands, and you could see all these sites. Sometimes it's not very safe to go, but
there's a group in America called the Biblical Archaeology Society, and they run a magazine called the Biblical Archaeological Review, and that's what I first came across and started getting interested in reading about this. And they do tours every year, archaeological tours. I'm hoping my wife and I can save up money and do one of those one day. Be fascinating. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Well, there is something that's on my bucket list if I ever go to Israel, and if they haven't gone through it all. That would be the Temple Mount Sifting Project. That's where you can actually go on hands-on. They give you a bucket of dirt, you spread it out on a screen, you wash it off, and then you look for things like pot shards, beads, bullia, if it be that, or anything like that. It's fascinating to see what this was a bunch of dirt that was dug from the Temple Mount by the Islamic Wharf, or I think I'm pronouncing it right, and it was dumped in the Kidron Valley. And they took a bunch of that dirt and they sifted through. It's out of its context, but still you can find various things and have hands-on work to do it.
If Michael had me back next year, I was thinking it's time to go and look at Jerusalem and see what has been done there in the way of archaeology. And maybe also Shiloh, as David brought up, since he mentioned they found some interesting archaeological work there recently. So,
if you're willing to do it, we'll put you on the schedule.
All right. Of course, well, thank you very much. As I said, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll put the book back there, and you're welcome to look at it.